put the mental effort into every rep, like warm up to heavy. Every single rep matters because I was, like I said, relatively strong for a beginner, not for a weightlifter. But I got away with a lot of really poor habits because I was strong enough to muscle it through. And now I'm paying for it by having to either go backwards or fix a lot of things or stuff like that because I developed that habit where it didn't used to bother me, but now I'm efficient enough that like if 220 crashes on me, it's really hard to stand it up and jerk it. Whereas like before when I was learning, right, like if that happened with 155, it wasn't that big of a deal. I was so much stronger than my technique, I could get away with it.
Hey friends, welcome back to A Different Perspective. In episode 9, we will be interviewing Brittany Brooks. She is an experienced collegiate athlete, national weightlifter with Philadelphia Barbell Club, and a coach at NC Fit in California. We get to hear so much about her perspectives on being a coach, getting a coach, and pursuing elite athletics. Enjoy the episode and don't forget to subscribe.
Welcome everyone. We have our next guest on A Different Perspective. Her name is Brittany Brooks, and she's a well-rounded weightlifting and strength coach. She currently works at the prolific NC Fit gym as a coach. We're excited to have her on A Different Perspective and hear about her perspective both as a coach and as an athlete with a coach. Brittany, thanks for joining us.
Yeah, so like you said, my name is Brittany. I coach at NC Fit right now, and I went to school at WSU with Cole. Coached there for a little bit and just moved to California in March, so pretty new here.
Yeah. Awesome. Could you tell us a little bit about your background as an athlete? Maybe how you got into sports, what sports you played, and then how that transitioned you into being a coach?
Yeah, so I started, I played a ton of sports in high school. My first year of college, there's a program called the Novice Rowing Team, and I walked onto that. And it's a little bit different. You're attached to the varsity team, but you're not really part of the varsity team. You spend your first year there learning to row, and then if that goes well, you get invited onto the varsity team for your next 3 years. So I did get invited back. I raced with the WSU team until I ran out of eligibility. So my 4th year of school, I was a 5th year senior, still studying mechanical engineering. And my 5th year, quite a few of my friends were into CrossFit. We had a barbell club called Kook Strong, and so I knew them, and they introduced me to CrossFit, and they're like, hey, come do this. And I was like, well, I don't have anything else to do. I'm done rowing. So I did that with them for a year. Really, really liked it. I had been coaching wrestling and some other things previous to that. So WSU actually paid for my level 1. I got my level 1 and started coaching at WSU CrossFit. Was there for probably, I don't know, a year and a half before I started taking on more roles with them. I got to start doing scheduling and programming for coaching in the classes. And when I got a lot more responsibility, I really realized this is what I like doing. So I ended up getting hired at the university in a lab. So I was there 2 more years after I graduated and continued coaching there. And then John, the guy I'm dating, finished his PhD, moved out to California. I followed him and got a job at NC Fit, where I coach now. Yeah.
I want to make a quick note that you were 2 of my favorite geniuses ever.
Thanks.
So what part of San Francisco, for the listeners and viewers, what part of San Francisco is NC Fit located?
So we actually have a couple different locations in California. I work at the one in Redwood City, so pretty close to the Stanford campus. We have another one in Mountain View and one more in Campbell. All are just below San Francisco, but the one I work at is about, I don't know, 30 minutes from the edge of San Francisco.
Nice.
Yeah.
Overall, we're super stoked to have you on because you have this extra perspective of being a professional coach that is really critical because you've gotten to work with so many different populations. So I guess kind of a preface, what's the average population that you work with at NC Fit?
Oh, So actually, I think this is pretty cool. Obviously, the most of the people I worked with at WSU were college students because we were on a college campus. We had a couple of like pro staff, adults there. Now, I would say most of the people are between 30 and 50-ish, that age group. Yeah. We have a few of the younger members, like 20, but significantly older than it was at WSU, which was a pretty big change for me. Yeah.
Nice. What's like one of the biggest complications, not complications, but like the challenges kind of transitioning from coaching younger athletes?
I don't necessarily know if it's the age per se, but I think the biggest challenge I had coming from WSU to NC Fit is just the functional fitness, right? This is all they do. People pay a membership. They're there every day. Some of these people have been here for like 10 years, right?
Yeah.
So they know what they want. Whereas like WSU, which I'm really thankful for, and this is not like a bad thing, but because it's college students and it's every, semester, it changes. You just get a lot of different people coming in to see like, oh, maybe I'll like it, maybe I won't. Like this is my first semester here. I might not come back next semester. So it's a very fluid population, and we get new members occasionally, but for the most part it's a very uh, stationary crew at NC Fit. So like once they sign up, they're there for a while, and you get to see them really grow, which is pretty cool. Like we had that handful of people, right, that were at WSU from like freshman year to senior year, but for the most part you don't get to see people grow over several years, and you definitely do at NC Fit, which is cool. But way more stressful just because I think they know what they want at NC Fit, so the expectations are a little bit higher. As in, like now, right? I'm not a part-time coach coaching college kids. I'm a full-time coach. This is what I do. So like I have to do it well.
Yeah. That's really cool.
Yeah.
I like hearing that.
Yeah, so to kind of build on that point, I'd love to hear your perspective as a coach first about this idea of long-term athlete development. I think in my understanding, our country doesn't do as good of a job as maybe some others, maybe from a youth standpoint. But tell me about maybe the advantages of that now that you have a clientele basis. How does that change what you can do from a programming perspective or from a coaching perspective to be able to long-term plan? What does that do for you and what does that look like? And then also maybe applying that to maybe the youth population or your experiences in youth athletics and your development. Just maybe speak on that and your thoughts or ideas around long-term athlete development.
So, NC Fit is actually in a kind of a weird spot because we don't just program for our gym. So we have the NC Fit Collective and we program for like upwards of 1,000 gyms. Like there's a lot of people, right? And with that, we don't get to see everybody like we get to see at our own gym. So yeah, we put out blocks, right? There's way weeks in advance of the cycles that we're going to do and stuff like that. But I wouldn't say it's quite as normal as like say weightlifting, right? You have a 10-week program. It's pretty similar all 10 weeks. You're just building up as you go, like true progressive loading. Whereas CrossFit is supposed to be that like functionally constantly varied, right? It's definitely not random, but it's a lot less small linear progressions than it is like we always are trying to get cardiovascular movement in there. We're always trying to get strength in there. We're always trying to do that. For example, right now we're on a strength block. So once a week, or at least once a week, we're pressing, squatting, and doing the deadlifting. Oh, couldn't think of that. And our very first week, like 5 weeks ago, we tested all of our 2-rep max. So like Monday was deadlift 2-rep max, Wednesday was back squat, and strict press was Friday. Then the next week we built into like 4s, and so on. And then at week 4 we tested again our 2 reps. So in that sense it's a true cycle, but it's still different workouts every day. Like obviously we're getting like gymnastic skills and stuff like that. So yes, we get to see all of our people, and in that respect I see someone and I know their weakness is pull-ups, right? Well, instead of just randomly being like, well, everybody can scale with bands, right? I'm not going to have the same person do bands every single time there's pull-ups there, because I know that's not helping them. I'm going to say, okay, well, first we're going to work on this. And next time, since you did bands this first time, maybe we do jumping, or maybe this workout is a little less volume. So it would be a great time to do like eccentric pull-ups, stuff like that. So you as a coach can kind of individually scale people with a progressive loading, but as an overall program, it's not quite as easy to do individualized because we're programming for so many gyms. I don't know if that answered your question, but that's
It does.
kind of where we're at.
Yeah. And kind of the second part of that is talk about maybe your experience, maybe developing as an athlete, whether you thought it was the best way or it could have been better or worse, because I think things have changed so rapidly, especially in the realm of women's athletics and specifically for yourself in weightlifting. Maybe talk about your experience and then also what you'd like to see out of developing athletes long-term from the youth age.
Sure. So first, I have not fully developed my opinion on how specialized young athletes get, because I see the pros and cons to both, right? At this point, everybody's just getting so good at their sport, you kind of have to. It is what it is. Like if you want to reach top tier, you probably need to start when you're pretty young. But I also think that doing a mix of things when you're younger helps you be a better athlete in general, which helps you with your specialized sport. In my personal opinion, right? So I started rowing, did that for the 5 years at university, and then I switched to weightlifting. About as polar opposite as you can get. I had a huge engine, which you don't necessarily need for weightlifting. And I was like relatively strong, but not strong for a weightlifter. So that first year or two was a pretty big switch for me, like changing what systems I primarily used, trying to become a strength athlete instead of an endurance athlete. And in that respect, like knowing now how well I want to do in weightlifting, I kind of wish I would have started weightlifting sooner and not rowed. But experience-wise, I'm glad I did it. So I'm like torn. I got a lot of things out of it. And one thing I do really love about CrossFit is especially when you get really specialized, you neglect a lot of smaller muscles and movements that you should be doing because you're so focused on what you have to be for your sport. And with that, there's injuries, right? You're just not a great, well-rounded athlete. And CrossFit, because you do so many different things, it helps with that a lot, in my opinion, right? Like, do a CrossFit workout for a week, one every day, and you're going to feel sore in muscles you didn't even know you had. So that's what I mean, as in, like, I like, especially for younger athletes developing, trying to figure out what sport they love, seeing if that's the right fit, stuff like that. Definitely go out and do different things in your fitness, play different sports, stuff like that. But this is, again, where I'm torn. Like, if you know what sport you want to play, man, you also just kind of have to commit to it. So I don't know. This is something I've thought about a lot, and I haven't come up with a clear answer. But maybe here's my compromise. Specialize in your sport, but at least 2 days a week, you should do some type of accessory or outside work that doesn't necessarily have to do with your sport, but makes you a better athlete. That's what I'm going to go with.
Nice. Good compromise. And honestly, I would agree with that from the perspective of really any athlete, youth or older, with maybe a little bit more for a youth athlete. This is something that I've talked about a lot too. And there's a lot of like scientific recommendations, and like studies are still coming out with like how big should a general program be for youth athletes and things like that. And there was one thing that we had talked about a while ago for conjugate training that sort of had something to do with like this with general fitness base. Do you think, considering that idea of a general fitness base, that if somebody were starting a CrossFit program as a youth, that might set them up for a little bit more success if they were to start diving into a more specific sport following? Or do you think that CrossFit is something that you should develop as a separate athlete first and then come into it?
Um, CrossFit as in like competition sport CrossFit, or CrossFit like lifestyle hour a day class?
I would say, I mean, I would never recommend that somebody would start right with competition, which is totally what I did and why I got hurt so often. But I would say more from like the general health, hour a day, like get functionally more well-rounded.
With that distinction, absolutely. And for the exact same reason that you said, I wouldn't say go try and be a CrossFit athlete, games athlete right from the beginning, because you'll get hurt, right? You have to build a capacity in whatever sport you play. You
Right.
can't just start running and go run a half marathon. Like, it doesn't work like that. But as a lifestyle, like hour a day, absolutely. You start working on different mobilities, you start moving in a lot of different ways. Like, you get really aware of your body and different movement styles. And I think because it's so varied, you can take that into any sport and have a base. So, it's a compromise.
Cool.
Get some engine work. And even strength athletes, let me just say, you guys still need to do some endurance work. Like,
They don't want to hear that. I'll probably have to edit that out for this one.
yeah.
Yeah. With your experience in weightlifting and maybe in the competitive, I'm not sure what venues or specific competitions you've competed in, but can you talk about maybe the differences in weightlifting development for athletes at a elite level between United States and the way they might do it and maybe the rest of the world? Do you notice any differences between that in training methodologies or coaching styles?
Yeah, that's kind of a long, tricky answer, right? Because one, I've only ever trained in the US, so like there's that. But two, no shade at all. But you also have to consider drug use in other countries. So like the Bulgarian squat program might rip a lot of people apart who aren't using because they just can't handle that volume. They don't recover well enough, right? Versus people who maybe are. But as level wise, like that question, I think it's, at least with my experience, like this is a personal thing, is you have to build capacity. And again, that's with every sport. But when I first started weightlifting, right, I thought I was working so hard, doing so much volume. And I coached myself for the first almost 2 years of my career. And I just actually hit a year with my coach now, Jim Rutter from Philadelphia Barbell Club. And I remember my first like 2 months with Jim. I was like, this man is going to kill me.
I remember.
Oh my God. Like, I really truly thought I was doing so much volume, and I was training at least 2 hours a day. Like, I was working hard. You just don't know what you're capable of or what is expected at the next level until you get there. And I would say that was true when I was rowing, right? When I was a novice, I was like, I'm working so hard. Like, I could not work any harder. And then I got to the varsity program, and like our volume is double. And if novice me would have seen that, I'd have been like, there's no way. There's absolutely no way this is going to work. But like I said, I'm now in my third year of weightlifting, a whole year with like an actual coach programming for me. And it's pretty cool. I've competed a couple times on the national stage. I have a medal from my last under 25s. Obviously, COVID has happened this year, so I haven't competed at all, which is unfortunate. But definitely just watching myself grow level wise, but watching everybody around me. We have a couple people on our team who have represented Team USA internationally. And just the amount of work you have to do to get to that next level is insane. But it's cool. It's really fun to have a team to do it with.
That's so
Yeah. Kind of a follow-up to that really quick. With the increases in stimulus to your training, and that's kind of what it is as you elevate yourself, in my opinion, as you elevate yourself through the ranks, the amount of stimulus that you need to grow and to elevate yourself becomes increasingly difficult. And concurring with that is the amount of recovery you need to interject into now your training program. Can you talk about, and you don't have to give away any secrets of what you do, maybe some traditional types of recovery methods that you like to use, and maybe some non-traditional ones that maybe some people maybe underestimate the value of, even in its simplest form.
I would say the biggest one, honestly, and this took me a while, is sleep. When I was rowing, like I was a college student, right? I was in engineering. There were nights that I was not sleeping more than 3 hours. Like regularly, I would get less than 5. And I remember having a conversation with another coach back at home, and I was like, oh, it's not a big deal. I genuinely thought I was one of those people who just didn't need as much sleep. You know how like there's that like special population that doesn't need as much sleep to run?
Yeah.
I was like convinced because that's just how I ran. And as I started to get into weightlifting, I was not in school, so I wasn't studying all the time. I really started to like dial that in. Like my Fitbit is actually a really great tool, but it tells you like how you sleep, like how much deep sleep you have when you went to bed. Um, and I'm pretty good about like trying to make sure I'm getting what I'm getting, at least 8 hours. Um, Sometimes it's a little bit harder with my job because like I open. So this morning I was up at like 3:30. But then I make sure I come home and take a nap to finish out I needed like 2 more hours of sleep to get 8 hours. So like that is by far my biggest focus. I definitely don't stretch as much as I need to. That's something I'm working on. Most people should probably work on that. Um, I track my water. I'm not always great at it, but definitely try to be around a gallon, maybe less. But those are like the two biggest things I think for me is the sleep and the water. Uh, I eat well 90% of the time. So that's another one. So like those are the basics I think that I do. If something is really hurting, I go to like the Epsom salt bath, the rolling out, like I have a Compex, use that every now and then. Um, but honestly, nothing crazy. Even everybody on my team, like I think they get body work done, which right now in COVID, that's not really an option for me. But uh, that is like I think the highest level of recovery that they add to it is getting massages or acupuncture and stuff like that. But I think this is me gonna die on this hill. But everybody's looking for like the glamorous, like the Theragun's gonna fix everything and this is gonna do everything. But really, sleep, nutrition, water, that's really what makes or breaks it. And if you watch like high level athletes, like weightlifting might be a little different, right? Because it's a weight class sport. So a lot of the time you have to dial in your nutrition more so than maybe other sports. But I think relatively speaking, everybody at a high level, like you look at their diet, you look at how much they're sleeping, you look at that kind of stuff and like it's on point. It has to be. So especially the better you get, right? You have less room to mess up. The smaller things matter.
Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah.
Yeah, that's the recovery topic is such a cool thing, and it's honestly baffling to me that it's taken so long for the community, the fitness community, to kind of get behind this idea that like, yeah, you need to sleep.
Yeah, right.
So you touched on a couple of other topics earlier that I wanna dive into. First one was your process of actually like getting your coach, and I remember that this is such a cool story because, and I'll let you explain it, but just to preface, when I first met you, you were coaching yourself and you had gone almost an entire year. And then I remember you came back from a trip one day and you were just so stoked about meeting this guy that had offered you this opportunity. So can you talk
Yeah.
about that a little bit?
Yeah. So I will start by saying I do not recommend you coach yourself for anything ever. You're not unbiased. Like, and even if, so the reason I thought it was okay for me is I was never going to like not go to do a workout, right? I didn't need that. But on the other end of that, if I was having a really, really bad day, right, and I was supposed to hit these numbers, I just would beat myself up. Whereas like now, if it happens and it's truly I just am having a horrible day, Jim's like, okay, go down. Like, it's all right. It's one day. And I have like a voice of reason in my head. Whereas before, if that would happen to me, it still doesn't make me feel good. But it would just absolutely annihilate me. And I wouldn't be able to tell myself to like go down and finish your sets. I would just bash my head into a wall, like missing reps. Um, So that's one of the reasons you shouldn't have your own coach. But uh, there was no in-person coaches in Pullman. That's really why. I didn't want to pay, like $200 a month to send my video to someone for once a week feedback and say I'm on a team. Because to me, that's not coaching either. At that point, you're basically coaching yourself, but someone's giving you a generic program, right? With my job at the lab, we actually traveled to baseball stadiums and like did their strike zone analysis. So anytime I would travel, I would find a weightlifting gym and drop in, which was probably the coolest part of my job is I got to be at so many weightlifting gyms, which are very, very different than like a Globo gym or a rec center. It's just weightlifting platforms on the ground. Like everybody's doing what you're doing. It's really cool. And Philadelphia is where my team is at. So unfortunately, like on the other side of the country, but I dropped in there. I think I was there for 3 days. And the first 2 days, like Jim was super nice. I asked him if I could drop in and lift with him. I had known like two of the girls through Instagram. Like we had just become friends. Weightlifting is still a relatively small community. And I was like, hey, like, can I come in when you guys are there? And Jim actually wasn't there the first day. He was coming back from Masters Worlds with a couple of athletes. And so the next day I was there, I came and lifted. He was also there, lifted that whole time. He was really great, like helped me out, asked me some stuff. And then the very last day I was there, went through the whole session, again, really hit it off, super loved the team. And before I was leaving, he was just like, hey, like, I don't want to bombard you, but I want you to know if you want to join our team, like, I'm willing to coach you. And one, I just thought he did it super tactfully. Like he didn't rush me. He's like, I'll send you an email. That way, if you don't want to do it, like it's not a big deal. But otherwise, you absolutely can. The team was wonderful. I I remember I was like feeling pretty good about like a single clean and jerk. I don't know. I had like 100 kilos on the bar, so 220 pounds. And for just a single clean and jerk, I look around and there are 3 other girls doing it for a complex. And I was like, ah, okay, like, okay. This team's super strong. Like I said, a handful of them have a Team USA singlet. Uh, so I went home that next day, emailed with him. He's like, yeah, I'd like to coach you. He doesn't have a ton of remote athletes, which I think is pretty cool. Like I talk to him regularly. Anytime I want to send him videos, any day that I'm like feeling bad, like we talk regularly. I love my team. They are the most supportive. Like the other day I was having a really hard time. So I asked one of my teammates, I was like, hey, can like I FaceTime you during the session? FaceTimed Jim and the rest of the team quite a few times over quarantine, so I wasn't training alone. Uh, but yeah, he sent me my first, we do cycles in 3 or 4 weeks. So he sends me that on the Sunday that I need a new one. And we just started going. And like I said, in my first couple of months, I was like, I am gonna die. Like, there's no way I'm gonna handle this. Um, but turns out 13 months later, here I am still alive. So
Fine. Nice.
yeah.
That's awesome.
So
And
yeah, a drop in.
that's so cool because, I mean, you touched on another couple of topics there that like are important in from a psychological perspective because you're talking about like, well, first you hit the jackpot by getting a coach that was interested in you, not just you being interested in them. And then on top of it, it also came with this community that was just like endocytosed you into their group and just you became a part of that and like you fit in so well. That is so cool. Like that is an excellent experience. So thanks for sharing.
I mean, like, I think James, I called him James. Jim is wonderful. And there's no discredit to him, but like, there are other great coaches too, like, especially now that I'm in California. But I just love my team so much. Like, they're so wonderful to me. I'm across the country and they include me in everything. Like, it doesn't feel like I'm far away. And for that reason, plus I really like Jim, I can't think of switching to another team, even if it's closer. Yeah.
That's awesome. So cool. I'm jelly of the community because, I mean, for anybody who knows where Pullman is at, the community is Just the college. That's it.
Small.
Very tiny.
Very
Yeah.
small.
So I do actually have another quick question for you. Um, uh, Advice for like novice weightlifters. So like earlier you talked about you kind of wish that you had done this thing, but some people who you had started earlier than you did. But what about some people who know that they're starting in weightlifting and then they are there, maybe they already have a coach, but just like some things that really helped you understand like the workload, the ethic that goes into it, the discipline, and various aspects of being an athlete invested in this in a sport. Can you talk about that? Maybe from both perspectives of being a rower and an athlete or weightlifting?
Yeah. Um, so as a coach, like my advice to everyone is find a coach. Like if you're learning weightlifting, find a coach because it is so incredibly hard to teach yourself to do it and not fuck it up. And like if you teach yourself something wrong, it's really, really hard to fix it. As an athlete, I would say the one really cool advantage I had to coaching myself is I had to analyze video after video after video to figure out what was wrong because I had nobody to tell me. So I got really good at that. And I also got really self aware. And I think that's the one downfall athletes who immediately have a coach can have is if their coach doesn't tell them, they have no idea like how their body moved, how that rep felt. And this is, I think, for athletes in general, you should be aware of how you're moving. Like if I ask you, what did you feel on that rep? And you go, I don't know. That's not great. Like you're doing yourself such a disservice. So I guess my biggest piece of advice would be one, put the mental effort into every rep. Like warm up to heavy. Every single rep matters because I was, like I said, relatively strong for a beginner, not for a weightlifter. But I got away with a lot of really poor habits because I was strong enough to muscle it through. And now I'm paying for it by having to either go backwards or fix a lot of things or stuff like that because I developed that habit where it didn't used to bother me, but now I'm efficient enough that like if 220 crashes on me, it's really hard to stand it up and jerk it. Whereas like before when I was learning, right, like if that happened with 155, it wasn't that big of a deal. I was so much stronger than my technique, I could get away with it.
Right.
Now that's not the case. So
how much
yeah.
do you think that discrepancy between being strong enough for technique from a functional capacity versus having the technique over the strength, how much do you think that translates? Like we were talking about that, the general population, the people who are learning the clean and jerk and the snatch specifically for the purposes of general fitness, like they might not train at a high enough volume to be able to work on the technique enough. So like, do you think that they should devote more time to specific movements for longer before they start to go into this because of how important technique is in that? I don't know if I phrased that right.
Yeah. No. And here's why. Because I don't think you're ever not technically efficient enough to work on technique. It just means you might have to take your ego out of it. And instead of going super fast in class, right, with snatches, slow it down a little bit. And okay, you spend 6 months going slower on snatch workouts, right? But then after 6 months, you're better at it and you can finally start going faster and loading weight on. But if you just do poor rep after poor rep after poor rep so that you can go fast, you're never going to get faster. You're never going to get stronger at it because you're not capable of doing the movement to put more weight on it. And that just lasts forever. That's how you get, 4 years into the sport and you still haven't had a PR.
Right.
So it's hard because, and you'll see this anytime, right? Someone walks into the gym and either they are a pretty strong athlete, like you look at them and you're like, oh, you're pretty strong for a new weightlift or for like a new lifter, right? Or like CrossFit, for example. Oh, that's like a good deadlift, like nice. Or you have someone that you walk in and you're like, all right, you got a really great mile time, huh? Right? Like completely different.
Yeah.
And in the mile time scenario, I almost think they're at the advantage because again, they can't muscle their way through technique. It sucks at the beginning because they maybe don't get a go RX or like it sucks just like only having 10s on when you're snatching, right? But because they don't have that strength discrepancy, they have to do it right and they have to learn it right. Whereas like if you're a really strong athlete, like I was, and come in and don't learn it correctly, but you can muscle through it. Like, you know, if you can throw 135 pounds on there right at the beginning, no, it's not like extremely heavy, not for a weightlifter, but it is for a novice who is learning a movement. And especially when you're used to being strong, right? There's that ego there. You don't want to take it down to
Yeah.
learn the movement and do it well. Well, now you're really screwing yourself.
Yeah.
So I don't necessarily think you need to wait, because the only way you get better at it is by doing it. You just have to be intentional with every rep. Yeah.
Intention with every rep. That's important. So.
Cool. So now that we kind of laid this foundation of the value in having a coach, and if you want to pursue weightlifting potentially as a novice athlete or maybe even at an elite level, what can you give people as far as like maybe a couple suggestions, maybe 2 or 3 of things you should look for maybe in a gym, and then maybe in a coach, and then if you don't want to answer it from the good perspective, maybe give some ideas of like, this is a bad gym run, this is a bad coach run, these are the things that you don't want to see. Either way, you can answer it.
All right. Okay. So ideal scenario, this is like a spectrum, right? Ideal scenario is you're in a full-on weightlifting gym. Like it's just platforms, it's just weightlifting. You're with a coach who only coaches weightlifting, just because that's the best, right? If that's what they do, they're going to be really good at it for the most part. But even if that's not the case, generally speaking, the environment is there. Like everybody's doing what you're doing. You're training as a team, and that's just really helpful. I mean, if anybody's ever done a workout in their backyard by themselves, right, it's really hard for you to get the intensity like you would if you were in a class setting. That's just, that is what it is. So that's the first thing. Like try and find an environment where you're going to be thriving because other people are doing it. The second one I would say is try and find a coach who, most importantly, you click with. Okay, because like they could be the best coach in the world, but if you guys don't get along, it doesn't matter. They're not the best coach for you. You're not going to listen to them. If you don't trust them, like you shouldn't be with them, because there's a ton of trust that you need for that. But hopefully there's someone that knows what they're talking about with experience and with like education. I think the cool thing about weightlifting coaching credentials is you have to have athletes to back it up. So like you can go get your level 1 cert, you can go get your level 2 cert, but that level 2, there's a national coach, and to earn that title, you have to have national ranked athletes before you're allowed to have it. So you actually have to like put your money where your mouth is, right? I would say the one thing that I would say like run, that absolutely run, is if you, 1, don't trust them, or 2, you can't ask them anything and everything without feeling bad. Like you should be, not in like a like bad way, you don't trust them ask, but you should be able to ask your coach like, hey, like why are we doing this? Like why do we have 5s this block, or why are we doing this? And if they just say because I said so, they're not a good coach. Like there should be a reason for it. And if they're so wrapped up in their ego that like they think you're trying to undermine them or stuff like that, they're not a good coach. For example, I have asked Jim tons of times, like, hey, can I work on this because I think I need it? Or, hey, why are we doing this? And he tells me. And sometimes when I ask, can I work on something? He says, yeah, if that's what you think you need for some confidence, or like, sure. And sometimes he says, no, this is what we're doing and this is why. But he's always willing to explain to me why we're doing what we're doing. So if you can't ask your coach a question and you don't trust them, they're not a good coach for you. The other thing, like, and this is just kind of part of the problem with online coaching. Not all of them are bad, right? I do online coaching, but if you're paying an absurd amount of money and you're not actually getting attention, it's probably not a great idea. So like, I'll use Catalyst Athletics for an example. Let me say, think they are wonderful. They're phenomenal coaches, cool people. I've asked them so many questions and they've been super, super nice to me and like answered I have friends like that are on their team, like on their actual team. Okay, so they have like their athlete team and they have like people you can pay for. And Greg himself, the guy who runs Catalyst, he has said, I would not pay the amount of money people pay for me to like coach them. He has said that. But there's so many, especially newer athletes who are like, Catalyst is a great team. Like, I want to be with them.
Yeah.
Find a local coach who you pay half the price. It's going to be individual. You'll have in-person time instead of just putting a video on a stream for him to see once a week. Like, you'll be so much better off learning from a lower level than you would be by like attaching yourself to a name and not actually getting coached.
Right.
So that's another hill for me to die on, you know.
No, I agree with that. And to kind of sum up what you said there, kind of in those 3 points, I'm a nerd, so I created a little acronym for you. So now you can start telling this to everybody. And it's the 3 C's of maybe competition, or maybe 3 C's of the athlete. But it is community, cohesion, and communication with your coach. And it seems like that's kind of what you were going for there, because the community aspect, you've touched on it a couple of times, like the fact that you are around people who are doing what you're doing and are invested in you as much as you're invested in being a part of them. Yeah, I love that. I think community is such a big aspect of anything, and it's one of the reasons for sport in the first place. As much as we want to push ourselves, we also want to be part of a group that we can either be recognized in or be a part of just in some form or another. So community is so important. And yeah, I agree with all those points. That's awesome. So we meant to talk about this earlier because this was one of the things that you touched on about how training has been affected because of the pandemic. So
yes.
Can you talk about like some difficulties or maybe some alongside maybe some silver linings as a result of this? Because we're gonna plug your Instagram here, and everybody's gonna get to see the dope ass gym that you built for yourself. But I'd love for you to talk about that stuff.
Overall, honestly, it's not been wonderful. Um, as I talk about community and stuff, right? I have been I was all over. I was like lifting in our underground like garage port, and then I got kicked out of there. And then I was lifting in our actual parking lot, like out in the California sun, which was super slanted, got removed from there. And finally, it was all in a nice way, but also really irritating. And then finally, I got my own personal garage port at our complex. And so now I'm set up in there. It's nice and flat. I made a platform, some blocks, got a squat rack. It's great. I have everything I need to train. But it's definitely hard for a couple reasons. Like actually I'd say the first 3 months, I was doing pretty well. Like expectations were still pretty high. Motivation was high. I thought I'd maybe compete again this year. So I was like, gotta stay ready. As we get into like month 6 now, it's starting to get a little troublesome. If you've never had to do this, normally, right, if you go to a gym, you have like drink a pre-rec, workout, like get in the car, have some time to hype yourself up, get to the gym, and then like you're at the gym. So obviously you work out. Well, here I drink my pre-workout and I'm like sitting on my couch and I'm like, I don't really want to get up right now. And then before I know it, it's like 4:30 p.m. and I'm like, oh God, I have 3 hours of training to do. So that's not great. Got to go outside. There's like no lights in there. So if it gets dark, I'm just lifting in the dark. And on the unfortunate part is with my team being across the country, they are on a different time zone than me. So generally when I'm lifting, it's pretty late for them, like 8, 9 o'clock. So I can't FaceTime them as much as I would like to. So there's been a lot of like not great days training. I did silver lining here with the pandemic is California is like shut down, right? Philly not as much. And Jim, when like the gym was my coach, when the gym was supposed to open back up, he allowed just the national team to start training. So I flew down there and stayed with a teammate for almost a month. I trained with them, and I wouldn't have obviously had that opportunity if work was open. So while it was closed, I got to train with them for like a month, and that was wonderful. So great, like being around my team, being around like in-person coaching the whole time. So that was really high. Yeah, the last month though, realizing that I am not going to compete until at least 2021, it's been
Wow.
it's been difficult to keep myself
That's the timeline.
there. Yeah. So nationals hopefully will still happen in May of next year, but
Months. Oh, it's more
who
than 10 months.
knows?
Jeez, it's September already. Yes, yeah. Well, that's cool
Yeah.
though. So, do you guys have your program kind of like laid out in a macro cycle up until that point?
Yeah. No. So we get them in like 3 to 4 week chunks. We get them. Jim has them programmed out for longer. It's been very weird this year because we were all tapering for senior nationals or like gearing up for that. That obviously did not happen. So we went into a strength cycle and we were like, all right, we'll stay here for, I think it was like 12 weeks or something. And then we were supposed to do AO3s, and AO3s got canceled and it went to the online format. And he was like, all right, well, we'll do like an in-house type meet, right? We'll just max out. And that happened while I was there, which was cool, but it wasn't like a true meet, right? You're in your home gym like with everybody. There's no audience, there's no like real stuff like that. It was just a max out day. And now we're supposed to be gearing back up for a competition because AO finals is technically still on, but it's going to happen just like AO3. It's going to go to online format. So if that doesn't happen, we're all going to max out again, but it's just not the same as like gearing up for a real meet, right? So yes, we're all now in a 12-week cycle. So I'm finishing up my last 2 weeks of this current cycle, and then we have 12 weeks until AO finals would be. So everybody's like on an AO final peak, 12-week peak cycle. But yeah, it's had to change a bit throughout this year.
Gotcha. Well,
But I'm still lifting, and I know I'm complaining. I do have to remind myself, like check myself every day and be like, you still have a barbell, you still have a place to lift, like at least you're getting to do it. It's just definitely not ideal.
yeah, that's understandable. Yeah, I mean, those challenges are things that I think everybody is relating to from, the average level all the way up. Because, like, I know like the couch thing, that hit me way too personally because, like, take your pre-workout and then I go out on my porch and then I turn around and
It's not the same.
the couch is still there, like it's not going anywhere. So just like, well, maybe I could. So, yeah, the motivation.
Nobody's watching you.
So, I definitely.
Yeah.
So we got a few minutes left, but I really wanted to ask you, like, have you been reading? And if so, what kind of books have you been reading lately?
So I actually listen to audibles more than anything. Me and John like listen to them as like a book club type thing. We listen and talk about it. We just started a book. We're on chapter 7 called The Name of the Wind. Pretty good so far. And then I have a book by my bed, and I'm gonna have to take you guys on an adventure. Hold on, because I gotta look at what it says. It's dark. Sorry.
This is the first on our podcast.
Sorry, guys. Oh, okay. I was right. I was like, I'm going to be so embarrassed if I say the wrong name, but it's called What It Takes. And that's like a motivational self-help type book. Really like.
Who's the
And
author?
You couldn't have asked me that while I was in there.
Oh, yeah, you got to get up. Go do it again.
All right. We're going it. Nope, it's too late. I read this one every once in a while. When I'm like trying to fall asleep, I'll read like a chapter a day, and that's really nice. This is the book. I'm going to show you guys. So, What It Takes.
Lessons in the Pursuit of Excellence.
Yes. I have really enjoyed it. And I try and keep one of these type of books on my dresser for when I'm about to go to bed. Read that, and then I listen to like fantasy stuff on my Audible. I tried like Atomic Habits, that I couldn't stand it. It was so slow, really repetitive. If it helps you out, I'm there for it, like nice, but I couldn't get into it. But this book, however, it's been really good. So check it out. He is talking from like a businessman standpoint, like CEO, banker.
Okay.
But it's really good.
Nice. Yeah, our last guest recommended some business, a book that was written by Dale Carnegie, like a prolific businessman that did some prolific business things, as far as I understand. And yeah, so that's cool. I think that there's a lot to be drawn from different fields for motivation and all that stuff.
Where can people find you? We'll plug your Instagram in on the description. If people want to get in contact with you, or we'll put links to people you work with, potentially if they're interested in your stories and working with them as well.
Yeah.
You want to quickly plug those for us?
Yeah, so I'm really only on Instagram, and it's Brittany Joy 12, BrittanyJly 12. That's pretty much just me lifting. So if that's not what you're in for, not the most thing. I share a lot of NC Fit stuff on there, some nutrition stuff, but pretty much all fitness on there. That's really it. That's really my only social media account. But would love to have you. So check it out.
Yeah. Well, yeah, so that's pretty much what we got for you today. So I think maybe let's end this one with a big old smile, because I want to get a quick picture. And yeah, so I'm going to screenshot this. So everybody smile in 3, 2, 1. I hope it worked. Okay.
Oh, I had to blink so bad. Oh.
Oh, that was perfect. All right, that's great.
Good. Well, thanks, guys. I really did enjoy talking to you. So.
I enjoyed talking to you too.
Yeah, thanks for joining us.
All righty, everybody. We'll have a wonderful evening, and we'll see you on the next one.
All right.